All right, well, welcome to another episode of Resources for Humans. I'm your host, Jack, the founder of Lattice, and today I'm here with Aaron Levie, the CEO and founder of Box, at his office. So
Good to have you.
Thank you very much.
Chair comfy enough for you?
I'm very,
Okay.
Yeah, it's great.
Good.
So
I don't know how ergonomic the whole thing is. But
well, I don't know. It's very mid-century modern.
Yep.
So when you got started a long time ago, it's
Yeah.
been a while at this
We've
point.
been in this for a really long time.
40, 50 years.
Yeah,
And
it feels like it.
yeah.
Certainly in startup years, yes.
So when you got started, you were in college.
Yeah.
What motivated you then to get started? What
Yeah.
was driving you then?
Probably a mix of boredom and inability to easily share files. So that was this combination of had free time and found this really, at the time, annoying problem, but we didn't realize how sort of big it was. But this, I had an internship at the time working in a corporate environment that had a lot of legacy IT solutions, and then in school, using a lot of just really inefficient processes and technologies for sharing data, USB thumb drives, FTP sites, emailing yourself files. So ran into this problem of like, why is it so hard to share data? Like, you just want to be able to work from anywhere, pull files up from any device you're working on, and it was way too hard. So got this idea of what if you could just make it really simple to be able to access, share, and work with your data and files from anywhere. And it turned out that nobody else was really working on this problem in 2004 at the time when we came up with it.
So at the beginning you're motivated by the problem.
Yeah.
I just walked in here. There's 2,000 people here. This
Yeah.
is an establishment. Are you motivated by the customer problem now? Is it the employees? Like how are your motivations different today than when you started?
Well, actually, I think that I personally have been in sort of this sort of never-ending search to always get back to the core and to the sort of smallest possible unit of what we do, which is make a customer insanely successful with our product and help solve a really hard problem for them. And that was what we did when we were 4 people living out of a garage in Berkeley when we dropped out of college, and we just 24 hours a day we were working with customers, we were innovating, we were building new features, we were doing customer support. You're just sort of in that mode, and sort of what I think about now with 2,000 people is how do you replicate that at scale? It always comes down to building an incredible product that people love and building an organization that can deliver that incredible product and service to your customers. So I spend most of my time trying to figure out what are the highest leverage ways that I can help influence our ability to do that now at 2,000 employees. But it's always about delivering an amazing product for customers.
So one of the areas that we work on at Lattice is goal setting.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is this sort of aspirational, customer-centric ideal.
Yep.
How do you balance that with the need for metrics and hitting numbers and having teams aligned?
Yeah, keeping the business actually afloat.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would be fun if you didn't have to have metrics and you could just continue to get funded forever. I think what you do is you have to fuse those things together so they become one and the same, and they're not sort of separate principles or goals. So we have a core value which is blow our customers' minds. That's sort of the first core value of our 7 values as an organization, and a very meaningful percentage of our corporate metrics ultimately relate to, are we actually delivering an incredible experience for our customers? Things like our net retention rate, so how often are we keeping customers happy, not just that they'll keep their account with us, but that they're growing their usage and what we're doing. How active are our users? What is the kind of ways that we're delivering customer support? How do they value that? So a lot of our metrics as an organization relate to, are we delivering on that true north ideal of blowing our customers' minds? And then there's a bunch of other financial operational metrics that just ensure that we're building a healthy company in the process. Are we cash flow positive? How is the revenue growth rate? But you want to make sure that the values of the organization and the North Star, vision is very aligned to your even KPIs that you are going to be thinking about on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. And we have to make sure those things ladder up together and don't become inconsistent or incongruent in any way.
So when you think about these goals, there's a lot of different philosophies. The goals should always be a little bit too hard and you should miss them a little bit, or some people think that you want them actually to be a little bit under, so you have a culture of kind of winning.
Yeah.
How do you think about that?
Certainly I don't think that you should set fake goals just so you can have a culture of winning. That could certainly lead to disaster. It all depends on the type of goal that we're talking about. There are some such foundational goals like cash flow and kind of core financial performance that you really want to make sure you're hitting exactly the number that you think you're going to do. In that case, you probably want somewhere between a couple percent deviation on what the goal is. So 98% to 102% is probably what you want on like a core financial metric. For things that are much more about the long-term vision and execution of the company, sort of 1, 2, 3 years out, bigger bets in the business, we at least think that you should likely be often missing those goals and targets because not always, because eventually you want to get the flywheel going where you're exceeding the targets, but often early on you're going to be missing those targets because you want the goals to be aspirational enough that really causes you to think about the underlying mechanisms of what you're delivering to see if you could achieve a much bigger outcome. So when you think about the total number of signups in your product, or how happy customers are with your service, or how active your user base is, these are things where you want to be setting pretty significant aspirational long-term targets, which means that for the early period of building out that area, you're often going to be, unfortunately, in the red, because you're still building the systems and the processes, the technology, the product, the service, to be able to actually go and hit those goals. So we sort of afford for somewhere between, at any given time, probably 20, 30, 40% of our goals are going to be yellow or red, which means that we're not delivering on the target that we wanted. But what that causes us to do is be able to very quickly post-mortem and do kind of continuous improvement on what could we be doing better about this area? What is the reason that we're red? Is it is it people? Is it team? Is it technology? How do we go and solve that problem? But usually you'll see our dashboards have that amount of yellow or red on it, and we think that's very healthy.
And how do you culturally maintain that health, that health around a lot of red goals without people feeling attacked or like their goal was too hard or like they should be pointing fingers? How do you keep a healthy culture in the face of we're missing the targets that we set out?
Yeah, I think, first of all, you need to have a healthy sense of vulnerability in the organization where people can feel comfortable saying, I didn't hit my target, here's why, here's what happened. It's easier to be able to create that environment when you do have the facts and you can be as objective as possible. So you can say, we didn't hit this target because we weren't able to launch this feature on this date, which meant that we were 3 weeks behind where we thought we'd be, which meant that we weren't able to ultimately build the kind of growth metrics that we expected. So being able to build an environment where people feel safe, kind of talking about either failures or areas where they didn't end up accomplishing their goal, making it so they're not punished in any way, where you don't sort of take people off the project when they hit their first red or yellow or the first couple, because the moment that the organization thinks that the moment that you miss one of your goals, you're not going to be able to go on to the next initiative, is the moment no one's going to take risks, and then everyone's going to be kind of quote unquote sandbagging on their goals and actually only signing up for things that they know they can achieve. So you have to build an environment where risk taking it's hard to do risk, like failure is celebrated. That is always a little bit difficult because you want to learn from failure, you want to make it as transparent as possible. I don't know how much you celebrate it, but what you can't do is sort of punish for it, unless of course it's something egregious or violation of the organization's principles. But one of our principles is take risks, fail fast, get you done, and as a part of that, we expect that there's going to be failure. And if you're on a project that doesn't achieve its results, we're going to diagnose it. Was it something that we think it was just reasonable why it didn't achieve its goals? Maybe the goals were too high. Maybe something didn't ship in time. We're going to learn from that. We're going to try and improve. But you're not going to be like taken off the project, or you won't be the manager of that team anymore.
Yeah. On the risk taking,
and I think that a lot of organizations, particularly if you look at sort of the, new way of working versus maybe a more traditional way of operating and scaling an organization. And a lot of other organizations over time, if you think about the past, 20, 30, 50, 100 years of kind of the industrial sort of management science that scaled up, there was a lot of risk if you failed in your department or your organization, and you would get fired, you'd have to, take a lower assignment. And that would just cause you to ultimately have less ambitious goals. It would cause you to be less transparent and less open about issues you're running into. You'd obviously be less vulnerable in that kind of environment, because your job is to sort of hide any of the risks or any of the failure and not have other people know about it and not sign up for goals that could cause you to have that failure. So you have to build an environment where it's comfortable to talk about these things every quarter. We do a quarterly all hands where we go through all the red, green, and yellows in the business. And all of the reds and yellows generally have lessons that are associated with them. Why did we miss in this area, and what are we going to do to retool? And so again, it's not like a celebration. You don't have like balloons falling from the sky when we had red, but you do sort of have open and honest conversations about what we're going to tweak and how we're going to change, and hopefully how we can get it back on track.
So early companies often are able to do these, they take these risks because they have nothing to lose, and the types of people they have are risk takers.
Yeah.
You guys have grown from, 4 of you, I guess, when it started to 2,000 of you, and
Yep.
naturally companies become sort of more risk averse.
Yep.
So how do you balance, like from a hiring perspective, finding the types of people who are still going to be people you're betting on, not
Yep.
just people who are tried and true? Like, are you able to, where do you make those trade-offs?
It's tough, and you do, despite sort of me having been here when we were 3 or 4 people, and then helping kind of see it scale up, and like my own sort of risk tolerance being quite high. That's why we sort of started the company in the first place. You do sort of see over time that even I have a low tolerance for risk in certain key areas. I mean, there's obviously there's the easy stuff to have no risk tolerance around, like financial, accounting, security. Those areas are quite straightforward. But even in product areas where I believe that we have very particular product experiences that I don't think we want to modify. I bring a certain conservatism in the organization, and so you kind of want to have people that can push back against that. You want to be able to have really healthy debate on. Could we be innovating more in this one particular area? Could we be taking risks in this other area? I think things like the power of A/B testing that mostly was born out of modern software development practices of constant iteration on products. That can be brought to any part of an organization, so you can feel comfortable about saying, you know what, this is a risky area. We want to do it. We want to test it in an isolated way. So we're going to have we're going to go test it with one particular audience. It doesn't have to be a product feature. It could be a new way of delivering customer service. It could be a new way of doing pricing and packaging. It could be a new way of doing HR, and then we'll scale it out if it works. And so having that sort of test-oriented, scientific method-oriented way of testing out new ideas gives you the ability to actually have a higher tolerance for risk, because you know that you can try new things and it's not going to necessarily scale to the rest of the organization or the rest of what you're doing if it's not successful. So taking that mindset. Now the next question is, how do you bring in people into the organization that can continue to push things forward, and can you bet on people, not just new ideas? And of course, that again is another area where you have to use a high degree of judgment on the type of area. What is the risk of that part of the business sort of not succeeding, or achieving its exact kind of precise goals? And so you have to make the judgment call of what kind of talent are you willing to bet on, and hopefully set really high aspirational targets for it. They can kind of grow into that challenge. Versus what areas are you maybe not able to afford that kind of bet because of the time scale that you need to solve the problem, because of the risk that might be in that particular area, and those are also so judgment oriented in each particular area.
So the concept of A/B testing, like your whole company, is super interesting.
Yeah.
Has it been easier to do that, when the company was 50 people versus 500, or does it go in waves, or how does that manifest over like the last 10 years?
I actually think it is easier to do that at scale now, because as same principles apply in product. You can't really A/B test something if you don't have a large enough user base where you could meaningfully test, on some sample. And the same thing is true in an organization. So now at 2,000 people, we can run kind of experiments. In a particular organization, we've been running a performance management experiment in one team to see does certain stratification of performance levels do better than a different way of stratifying performance, and in terms of the quality of the feedback that you get, the quality of the compensation levels. And we would not have been able to do that at 50 or 100 people, because your test would be ineffective on 10 people. And so I think as long as you can think about it methodically, like you are actually running experiments, and you're going to take the experiment that works the best and then scale it out, and treat it in a kind of A/B testing kind of mindset, you actually can have a really exciting way to continue to evolve your culture. And this is something that I unfortunately don't see enough from larger organizations, but I think we will see as we move more into this sort of new era of work. I think we will see more of this experimentation happen.
When you think about your culture, do you think about intentionally setting it the way that you want it to be, or do you think of looking at what the sort of truth is and kind of trying to hone in and improve like what the best of what box is. And one of the examples that I think of is like your sort of burn the boats moment when you decided to go for the enterprise. This is a long time ago at this point, but that was obviously, that must
have... It wasn't like we didn't really have any boats. It was more like we had some canoes and kayaks, and so like we like burned the kayaks.
Easy to burn.
Very easy to burn. Not a lot of like wood to worry about.
But that must have come with some cultural change to go through stuff.
I mean, just the 20 people in the organization, we had to get in a room and say the kayaks are burning.
So today is it? To what degree is it, this is my vision for the culture, or to what degree is it, this is what we see and this is what we sort of lean into?
I think it's a little bit of both. We have sort of aspirational targets based on what we think we could be doing better, especially if we learn something from another organization. You know, maybe Amazon is better at decentralized innovation than us. Maybe Netflix is better at an ownership culture than us. Maybe a different industry, an Apple, a Zappos is better at customer service in some area. How do we learn from those things, and how do we bring those into our culture? And so that might not be an existing best practice we've even been doing that we can kind of go out and scale. It might need to be taking something that we think is even a much sort of much better utopian state for some particular part of our culture that we want to aspire to become like, and we want to be able to kind of have a comparison of where we are today versus where we could be in the future with this type of execution. And then in other areas, it will be learning from our organization, doing a survey of the organization, seeing where the hot spots are of maybe really positive things that we want to reinforce. So we learn a best practice around internal communication, or we learn a best practice around goal setting and execution, and then we want to actually go and have that best practice permeate the rest of the organization. And we will do that in a relatively tops-down kind of way. We established a group of all of our sort of directors and above in the organization. It's about 150, 200 people in the company that we get together monthly to go and review how the business is doing and business performance. And in that process, we're effectively learning from each other on what different organizations and teams are doing that we think are new methods of doing something that we think are going to be useful to scale. So you have to be able to know where are those bright spots, and then how do you go and have them permeate the rest of the organization.
Yeah, I think I heard once at Google that they, with their top performers, they didn't try to do much with them. They just tried to observe them and replicate it. So it's almost like an organizational version of that.
I mean, within your company, there's 100% unequivocally all of the lessons you would likely need to be able to sort of scale the perfect organization. And your job is just to find out where those lessons are, and then figure out a way to actually do the change management to get those lessons to everybody else.
Are there any particular companies or cultures that you look up to or try to like learn a lot about to replicate?
Yeah, I think it's on a sort of per sort of category basis that we try and learn from cultures. I don't think there's a single company that we say, man, if we just could operate like this one company, we would be so much better. We'd be performing so much better. I think there are certain principles that are maybe even more enlightened versions of our own core values that we think if we could learn from, we might be able to achieve that value even that much better. So again, like I mentioned Netflix, but so we have a value of be an owner, and this idea of sort of extreme ownership. Take responsibility for the area that you're driving. Hold yourself and your team accountable. Make sure that you're learning the business and learning the lessons enough within your team, so that way you really truly can be a sort of self-sufficient unit that can go out and execute, obviously within the broader system. Well, there are companies like Netflix and Amazon that do that incredibly well, and so we want to sort of borrow and steal ideas of how do they actually create that type of ownership. What is it about their people practices? What is it about their goal setting? What is it about their performance management structures that let them go and create that level of ownership? But there might be other things that we might not pull from those organizations. So like from Amazon, we haven't taken the idea of writing the 6-page note before a meeting. It's just not something that's much of our part of our culture. So we'll kind of take specific ideas that we think relate to one of our values, where we think it's being done incredibly well, and then pull that into the organization.
How do you learn about these other cultures? Do you read a lot? Do you just have all these CEOs over for dinner? Like, what do you do?
They tend to not want to come to my apartment, so less CEOs over for dinner.
You don't cook for them?
Yeah, that would more like heating up in the microwave.
Yeah, that's nice.
I mean, the good news is there's books on almost every company you could imagine. Now, not all of those books kind of give you all the secrets, but between books, between YouTube, between your video series, there's enough content out there where there's not a single company that if you wanted to learn from, you couldn't find the information out there on how they've kind of tweaked their process. Patty McCord, former head of talent at Netflix, wrote the book Powerful. She has a lot of lessons in there that really are manifested within the Netflix culture, so you can kind of learn from that. There's plenty of books and literature on how Amazon operates in this area. I mean, Delivering Happiness at Zappos kind of teaches you a little bit about very kind of customer service oriented culture. So I think there's a lot of content and material out there if you put your mind to it.
So you and your co-founders are relatively young.
Yeah.
How did you manage to scale yourselves? Like, how did you learn to grow with bigger teams? Is it executive coaching? Is it learning from people under you? Like, is it mentors? Like, how does someone who is seeking to scale themselves accomplish that?
I think, so first of all, I mean, 2,000 mistakes help along the way. So just constantly learning from, okay, in that meeting, it would have been better if I didn't call out that one thing. And this, session, I could have been calmer in delivering this feedback. And setting that goal, we probably could have, been more thoughtful about the implications of the downstream implications of that goal. So, like, unfortunately, some of this just comes with lots and lots of failure, lots and lots of mistakes that you overall over time learn from. A lot of it is learning from the people that we've had on our teams that have been in organizations that have 10, 20, 30 years of experience in some cases, and studying what they do and being able to kind of take a lot of lessons from how they've operated. So our leadership team and the leadership team from the leadership team, I've been able to learn from a ton over the years, and I think that we've each sort of honed our own respective roles and the type of management style that we have between the three of us that are in the company now, and everybody has to sort of find their own path of what kind of manager or leader they want to be, and I don't think there is like one perfect fit for all types of leaders, and you have to kind of know what are your superpowers going to be that you think are going to be something that you're going to bring to the table in a big way, and then how do you make sure that you're building a great team within your team that can help you augment the areas that you're not going to be good at.
Yeah.
And make sure that you're creating that kind of really balanced dynamic of portfolio of skills that come together in a very powerful way.
And I guess sort of analogously, how much do the early employees who are still around matter to sort of institutional knowledge or values? Like, do you still keep in touch with all those employees? Like, how does that work as you grow?
Yeah, I think it is incredibly important. At the same time, if that is your only way of maintaining and scaling your culture, then you're doomed to fail. So it's I see it as both symbolic and also just like sometimes they're the deepest livers of our culture. And so it's great on those two dimensions. But at the same time, you sort of rely on tribal knowledge of your culture to really have it scale out. You have to have living, breathing examples of every new cohort of people that come in that are going to be able to live and operate in the way that you expect the rest of your organization to operate. So we do new hire orientation every 2 weeks, and I give a presentation every new hire orientation on our values, how we live by them, how we expect everyone else to live by them, and we need to make sure that our culture and our values are propagating to every new group of people, and hopefully evolving and improving in every new hiring class, because we've learned from the last 1,960 people what we could do better in the next 40 that are coming on board. So I think we always want to be evolving the culture, but you certainly want to be getting as much of that energy, as much of that new institutional knowledge from your new employees as the ones that have been around for a long time.
Yeah, we talk about culture add rather than culture fit,
Yep.
and sort of evolving with
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Okay, a few years ago you IPO'd. So what has changed and what has stayed the same? Like,
Yeah.
how do you feel different in your role now?
Yeah, I think I think a lot of organizations and CEOs sort of lament the quarterly shot clock that you have with earnings and Wall Street, and there's 100% truth in Wall Street is very, very near-term focused. There's no question that they really only care about your last quarter's performance and what are you gonna be doing in the future. And so it's very, very near-term oriented.
Do those calls make you nervous?
Well, they're recorded, so it's not as nerve-wracking. But the Q&A session afterwards is obviously live. But I think we've done something like 12 or 14 now, so
You're
you
over
got
it.
used to it.
Got it.
But in general, the sort of that quarterly cadence tends to actually align pretty closely to my own impatience of how I like to kind of see progress in the business. So I think I'm uniquely suited for that kind of operating rhythm. But what it does is it forces your organization to have to be, really thinking about what are we going to execute, what progress are we going to execute on in the near term, so over the next 3 months. But how do you do that without without compromising or in a way that's not detrimental at all to the long-term goals of the business? And the moment that you sort of veer so much into the quarterly performance, you will absolutely make sure that in 1 or 2 years from now, you don't have the product strategy, you don't have the growth rate that you want to have. Conversely, if you only focus on the long term, you won't actually achieve your quarterly performance. So I think it's actually a really good rhythm to be in as a company, which is to be able to balance that near and long-term focus as an organization. So that's the first thing. Second thing is the scrutiny, the intense focus on your business performance, your numbers, how the company is executing is a really good thing, because it causes you to have to make the changes in the business in those areas where you could be like, I could get to that next month. Normally there's that burning fire over there where you can't afford to actually not deal with that burning fire, because the market will see it, and it'll be way more painful once it's fully sort of manifested in the core of the business. So it causes you to have to move more quickly on key issues. It causes you to have to think about the sort of scrutiny and the transparency in a very different way. So how do you make sure you're operating with a level of openness and transparency in the organization? Because your employees will see what's going on, because the market's going to see it. So it causes you to create a much more open and transparent environment internally, I think quite coincidentally.
So internally, what's the culture on the day after the quarter? Are you celebrating last quarter, or are you talking about next quarter? Like, what's the vibe?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we can't give out all of the numbers at the day end, because a lot of that is material non-public information, but we kind of can signal toward how we're doing. And then in general, in our all hands, which tends to be 7 to 10 days after the quarter end, we're probably spending 30% on the past quarter's performance. So what we did well, what we didn't do well, what we can learn from, what we need to continue to improve on, and then about 70% of the time on the forward-looking goals that we have. And that tends to be the balance that we have for most things in the business. Is let's review what we did in a backward-looking way, but let's put a lot of our emphasis on the future and what we can do better, as opposed to kind of belaboring what we did in the past too much.
Yeah. So early on for any startup, like where any founder, all they're thinking about is, how do I keep the company alive? How do I just sort of get through whatever I'm trying to get through? At this point, Box is established. It's going to endure. Do you?
Well, knock on a lot of wood.
Knock on a lot of wood.
Jeez.
But it seems
that's like the worst luck thing to possibly say.
It's all going. It's all going down.
Okay, thank you.
Do you feel a responsibility, like, to sort of like the broader community, or to tech, or to the country? Like, are there any things as a public CEO that you now have a desire or sense of responsibility to sort of speaking towards?
I think, I think certainly as we've grown as an organization, we've realized that we do have a greater responsibility, at a minimum locally in our local community, and issues that are local to technology in Silicon Valley. So whether it's helping improve the kind of quote-unquote pipeline problem, and how do we get more people into tech and actually taking more responsibility for that, as opposed to sort of continuing and persisting the issue as somebody else's problem, or it's just local geographic issues, and making sure we're supporting the nonprofits that surround our company and have made sure that we have a community that has been great to be able to flourish in. To then more of the national issues that we face. So whether it's challenges with immigration reform, whether it's social issues at the national level that we care a lot about, because either it affects our employee base or our customer base, or just our like fundamental principles of us as a kind of set of people inside of an organization. So we do get a little bit more actively involved, and by the year we get more active in this area. We launched a nonprofit arm of the business about 4 years ago called Box.org. That's where we both do charitable giving, as well as give away our technology and make sure that Boxers, our employees, are are actually going out and volunteering on these issues, whether it's disaster relief or homelessness. So we do want to make sure that we're as involved in the community locally and nationally as possible.
And then I guess my last question is, what is something about Box that you hope is definitely the same in 5 or 10 years, and what's something that you hope is definitely different in 5 or 10 years?
I hope that our core values that we kind of established as we started scaling 8 or 10 years ago are going to be the same at the core and continue to manifest in even more impactful ways. And this is just around how we execute, how we collaborate, how we build a culture of inclusion and people being able to be themselves, and a culture of ownership. So I hope that those remain the same. I hope that our focus on customers, I know for a fact that will be the same. That's very core to who we are as a company. And then the ways that we want to evolve, I think we are very motivated, especially with a lot of the challenges we've seen on the bring more communities into engineering and all the STEM education side of things. I'd like our organization to get vastly more diverse over time. So that is something that I would hope would look different in 5 or 10 years from now, and continue to again try and drive an organization where people can be themselves, they can achieve kind of their best work in our environment, no matter who they are and where they come from, and that's something that we're proud to do today, but we'd like to do even more of going forward.
That sounds awesome. Aaron, thank you so much.
Cool.
This
Thanks,
was
man.
great.
Good to see you.
Bye.